sharing some information about the workshops that were part of this From Science to Table project. Thank you, Paula, for introducing the project. My name is Dr. Chelsea Jallow. I am at the University of Manitoba in Canada, and I will be sharing some information about the workshops that were part of this From Science to Table project. So the workshops for this project took place between September 2022 and May 2023. There were four sets of workshops that took place, and they took place in 4 locations. So in each of these locations, there were 2 one-day workshops that took place. The first location was a social work foundation in a low-income neighborhood on the outskirts of Jallosh. The second location was a post-secondary technical education institute in Jallosh. The third location took place in the small town of Iwemm11, and the fourth location took place in the small and low-income rural town of Rio Chico. In location number 4, there was also a supplementary workshop that took place at an elementary school. So this is the information about the number of people who participated in the workshops. And you will notice that there was attendance for workshop 1 and workshop 2. Approximately 22% of people who attended workshop 2 had also attended workshop 1. In this table, you can see the breakdown of the number of participants per location. I will draw your attention to the red number in the table. So this is not the number of unique individuals because some people attended workshop 1 and workshop 2. However, keeping this in mind, in total, there were 294 attendees at the workshops, and we were very pleased with this result. So there were 2 objectives that guided the workshops, and they were that after participating in the workshop, the participants will be able to, number 1, identify information about the nutritional benefits of edible mushrooms, and number 2, apply skills to sow, grow, and harvest mushrooms for personal use and/or as small-scale business opportunities. There was also a theory of change that underpinned these workshops, and the theory of change was that active, multisensory experiential learning will foster participants' interest in edible mushrooms and will facilitate the workshop objectives. So when we use these 2 terms, active learning meant that we wanted participants to be actively engaged in the workshops. And that meant that they wouldn't just be sitting and passively receiving information, but rather the facilitators planned these workshops so that individuals who came to the workshops would be active in their learning, and in doing so would be co-constructing knowledge and understanding amongst themselves and also with the facilitators, co-constructing knowledge that drew on their own lived experience and ways of knowing. Multisensory is a term that we use to describe that the workshops were planned so that individuals would not just be listening to information, but rather would be using a number of their senses, such as watching, listening, smelling, tasting, and doing with their own hands-on activities in order to engage with the workshop content. So thinking about what the workshops looked like, on day 1, they began with interactive lectures, and they were interactive in that the presenters posed questions, engaged in dialogue with the participants, and so it was much more dynamic than simply presenting information. Furthermore, in the workshops on day 1, there were small group discussions in which the participants were placed into smaller groups and given some discussion prompts to reflect upon and to share from their experience and their understandings about food, about culture, and also about edible mushrooms. And certainly one of the best parts of day 1 was the cooking demonstration. And this was an excellent example of multisensory active learning. So a professional chef was at the workshop who brought all of the ingredients to prepare delicious foods that used mushrooms. And so we were all able to smell the foods as the chef was cooking, to listen to the explanation, to watch how these foods were prepared. And also, the best part was to taste the delicious mushroom empanadas and also a rice dish that used these mushrooms. On the workshop day 2, again, the principles of active learning and multisensory learning were important in terms of how the workshop unfolded. So workshop day 2 began with participants observing a demonstration where facilitators showed step by step, these are how you create your own inoculated mushroom trunks, and really showed, the steps from the beginning to the end of how people could be able to do this on their own. Next, everyone who participated in the workshop had the opportunity to create their own trunk to fertilize mushrooms. And so after watching the demonstration, they were able to have the materials available and to create their own fertilized mushroom trunk to take home with them, which would then produce mushrooms in 3 months after the workshops. So overall, we can see how these workshops really did incorporate many different active learning strategies and also multisensory approaches to engaging with the topic and the content of edible mushrooms. Now I'm going to share a bit of information about the evaluation approach. So surveys were administered to workshop participants after the second workshop. And you can see that in total, we had a response rate of approximately 50%. The surveys were 19 questions and were comprised of yes, no, and Likert scale questions, and there were opportunities to provide narrative feedback for every question. Participants could fill out the surveys themselves, or they could give their responses orally to one of the facilitators who would record their responses for them. So select evaluation findings. Most participants in the workshops identified as between the ages of 31 to 50 years old. And also most participants who filled out the surveys identified as women. In response to the question, how much did you know about the existence of edible mushrooms prior to the workshops? Most of the people who filled out the survey, 70% approximately, said they knew a little. So they knew more than nothing, but they didn't know a lot. So they knew a little bit about the edible mushrooms. When we asked participants, what did you think of the workshop? As you can see, of the people who responded to this question, everyone chose that they liked it a lot or they liked it. So we were very pleased with those results. In response to the question, what did you think of tasting the food with mushrooms? Again, of the people who responded to this question, everyone chose that they liked it a lot or they liked it. And I can certainly agree that was a real highlight of the workshops, to be able to smell and watch and also taste the food that was prepared with mushrooms. In regards to the question, what did you think of fertilizing mushrooms during the workshops? You see that there is a larger number of people who said that they didn't respond to this question because that happened in workshop number 1. And so if they didn't attend workshop number 1, then they didn't have the opportunity to fertilize their own mushroom trunk. However, of the people who did respond, who did attend workshop 1, you can see that they really liked that hands-on activity. And finally, we asked participants, should we do workshops about mushrooms in other locations? And you can see that the majority of individuals who responded, 88%, said that yes, we should pursue that. So our conclusions are that these workshops were successful, that active multimodal pedagogies were effective to achieve the workshop goals. And while these workshops were effective, we recognize that sustained resources are necessary to support workshop participants to incorporate mushrooms into their diet and or to continue to grow mushrooms for personal or commercial purposes. So these workshops were a success, and in order to really extend that impact, more sustained resources and supports are necessary. So on behalf of the team who worked on these workshops and this project, thank you so much for your time and engagement.
Yes. So, is there any question or comment? In the meantime, anyway, is there any comment, any specific comment for this talk? Jesus? Jesus, Paul? Or if not, we have, as we change the talk from analysis to, you have one question? Of course.
But maybe I need to wait for